Hey there, welcome back to this channel. If you love learning English through emotional and inspiring stories, make sure to subscribe and stay with us until the end, because this story will touch your heart and remind you that sometimes pain is not a punishment, it's a gift. David was a 27-year-old man who loved running more than anything else. He lived in a small town surrounded by green hills and open fields. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, tied his running shoes, and went for a long run. The sound of his shoes hitting the ground was like music to him. Running wasn't just a sport for David. It was his life, his passion, and his dream. He wanted to become a professional marathon runner, to travel the world and win races. He believed that if he worked hard enough, nothing could stop him. Pain, in his mind, was only for weak people. His friends often told him, "You train too hard, David. You should rest more." But David just smiled and said, "Champions don't rest. Champions run." For years, he trained without fear, pushing his body beyond limits. He never missed a single day, not even when he was sick or tired. He believed success came from being strong and avoiding pain at all costs. Then one day, everything changed. It was the morning of the National Marathon Championship. David had been preparing for this race for months. Thousands of people were watching, and cameras were everywhere. He felt ready, confident, unstoppable. The race began, and David started strong. The wind brushed against his face as he ran through the city streets. People were cheering, music was playing, and his heart was full of fire. He was running not just for the medal, but for his pride. After the first 10 kilometers, he was still leading the race. But as he reached a sharp turn, the ground was wet from rain. His foot slipped. In one terrible second, David fell hard to the ground. He felt a sudden, burning pain shoot through his leg. He tried to stand up, but couldn't. The crowd gasped. He had twisted his knee badly. Paramedics ran toward him and helped him off the track. David's face was pale. His dream was falling apart right in front of him. He looked back at the other runners passing by. Each step they took felt like a knife in his chest. At the hospital, the doctor examined him and said gently, "You've torn a ligament in your knee. You'll need surgery and months of rest." Months of rest. Those words felt heavier than any weight David had ever lifted. He couldn't believe it. He stared at the ceiling, silent, as if his whole life had stopped. The next few weeks were dark. David's friends visited him, but he barely spoke. He stopped smiling, stopped training, stopped believing. The strong runner who once feared nothing now feared everything, especially the future. Every day, he sat by his window and watched people jogging in the park. He felt jealous, angry, and broken. He thought, "Why me?" He believed that pain had stolen everything from him. His mother tried to comfort him. "Maybe this is a sign," she said softly. But David only shook his head. "A sign of what? That I'm a failure." At night, he couldn't sleep. The physical pain in his leg was bad, but the pain in his heart was worse. He kept replaying that fall in his mind again and again. He felt lost, like he didn't know who he was anymore without running. A few weeks later, he started physiotherapy. It was slow, boring, and painful. He hated every minute of it. He wanted to scream every time he tried to bend his leg. One afternoon, while waiting for his therapy session, David noticed an old man sitting in a wheelchair nearby. The man was smiling, chatting happily with the nurse. David looked at him and thought, how can he smile when he can't even walk? The man noticed David's angry face and said kindly, "Tough day, huh?" David sighed. "You could say that." The old man laughed. "I've had tough years, not just days." David frowned. "What do you mean?" The man pointed at his empty pant leg. "I lost my leg in an accident 15 years ago, but I didn't lose my smile." David didn't know what to say. The man continued, "Pain is part of life, my friend. But if you see it right, it's also a teacher." "A teacher?" David asked, surprised. "Yes," said the man. "Pain teaches us patience, strength, and gratitude. It shows us what really matters. Without pain, we would never grow." David looked at the man, his calm eyes, his peaceful face, and for the first time in weeks, he felt something shift inside him. He didn't understand it fully, but a small light of hope began to flicker in his heart. That night, David went home and lay in bed, thinking about the old man's words. Pain is a teacher. He repeated it quietly, again and again, until he fell asleep. Maybe pain wasn't his enemy after all. Maybe it had something to teach him, something important he had ignored for too long. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. David continued his therapy, though every session felt like a battle between his body and his mind. Sometimes he wanted to quit. Sometimes he cried when no one was watching. But each time he remembered the old man's words. Pain is a teacher. Something inside him refused to give up. Maybe this pain wasn't destroying him. Maybe it was rebuilding him. One morning, his therapist, Clara, smiled and said, "You've made great progress, David. You're walking much better." He looked down at his leg, still weak but stronger than before, and felt a small spark of pride. It wasn't victory, but it was hope. When therapy ended that day, David decided to visit the park where he used to run. It was a sunny afternoon, full of people jogging, laughing, and playing with their dogs. The air smelled fresh, like a memory from another life. He sat on a bench and watched the runners pass by. At first, his heart hurt again. He missed the feeling of running freely, the sound of his shoes on the ground, the rhythm of his heartbeat. But then, he noticed something he had never seen before, the joy on other people's faces. He had always been too focused on winning to notice how beautiful the simple act of running could be. David smiled for the first time in a long while. He realized that while he had lost the race, he had found something deeper, gratitude. Gratitude for being alive. Gratitude for learning, growing, and still moving forward. From that day, David started writing a journal. Each page was filled with his thoughts, lessons, and small victories. He wrote about his pain, but also about how it was shaping him into a stronger person. He began to see pain not as an obstacle, but as a guide, leading him toward a better version of himself. Months later, the doctor finally said, "You're ready to run again." Slowly, of course. David couldn't believe it. His eyes filled with tears. He went home, tied his old running shoes, and stepped outside. The first few steps were hard. His knee ached, His body trembled, and fear whispered in his mind, "What if you fall again?" But then he remembered the old man's smile. He took a deep breath and kept moving, step by step, breath by breath. Pain was still there, but it was no longer his enemy. It was his companion, reminding him of how far he had come. As the sun began to rise, golden light painted the sky. David stopped for a moment, his heart racing, his face covered in sweat. He looked around, smiled, and whispered to himself, This is the gift." He finally understood. The gift of pain wasn't about suffering. It was about transformation. Pain had broken his body, yes, but it had also rebuilt his soul. He was no longer just a runner chasing medals. He was a man who had learned to value life itself. From that day on, David trained again, not to prove he was strong, but to celebrate that he was alive. And each time his legs hurt, he smiled, remembering that every step, every ache, every scar was a reminder of his greatest teacher, pain. A year passed since David's accident. The scar on his leg was still there, but now it felt like a medal, a symbol of everything he had survived. He was running again, not as fast as before, but with a new purpose. Every time his feet touched the ground, he felt alive. He wasn't racing against others anymore. He was racing against the man he used to be. One morning, David received a message from his old coach. The city marathon was coming again, the same one where he had fallen a year ago. The coach asked, "Would you like to run again?" At first, fear returned. What if he failed again? What if he fell in front of everyone? But then he smiled, because he had learned something deeper than fear. He had learned that falling was not the end. It was only a step on the way up. He decided to run. The day of the marathon arrived. The sky was bright blue, and thousands of runners filled the streets. As David stood among them, he took a deep breath and whispered, "I'm not here to win. I'm here to thank my pain." When the race started, he ran slowly but steadily. People passed him, but he didn't care. Each step was a victory. Each breath was a gift. Halfway through the race, something beautiful happened. He saw a young boy sitting on the sidewalk, crying. The boy had fallen during the junior race and hurt his knee. David stopped running and walked over to him. "Hey," he said gently, "are you okay?" The boy shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I can't finish the race," he said. David knelt down, smiled, and replied, "I once thought the same thing. But pain doesn't mean it's over. It means you're growing stronger." He helped the boy stand up and walked beside him for a few steps. The crowd began to cheer. The boy smiled through his tears and continued running. David watched him go, and for the first time, he felt truly proud, not for winning, but for helping someone else rise. He finished the marathon that day, crossing the line slowly, with his heart full of peace. When reporters asked him how it felt to be back, he said softly, "I didn't come back to prove anything. I came back to thank the pain that made me who I am." Months later, David started giving talks in schools and community centers. He shared his story with others who were struggling, not just athletes, but anyone facing pain, fear, or loss. He told them that pain isn't something to run from. It's something to learn from. His message touched many hearts. People began to see him not only as a runner, but as a teacher of resilience and hope. One evening, he stood at the same park bench where he had once sat broken and hopeless. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and orange. David whispered to himself, "Pain didn't take away my dream. It gave me a new one, to help others find strength in their pain." He smiled, took a deep breath, and started jogging again, the wind brushing against his face. This time, every step felt lighter, freer, and filled with meaning. Because he had finally understood, pain is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of becoming who you are meant to be. So, my friends, pain is a powerful teacher. It breaks you, shapes you, and teaches you to rise again, stronger, wiser, and more human. If this story touched your heart and helped you learn new English words and emotions, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every story brings you closer to mastering English and to discovering your own strength.